Good evening and welcome to our ASBDA Young Band Director Outreach. I believe this is the third one we've done this semester, and I think we've had a good turnout. I'm sure numbers will come and go while we're here, but thank you so much for spending your evening with us. My name is Kim Pickering. I'm the band director at Lewisburg High School. Also on our committee for the Young Band Director Outreach is Carrie Swindle. She's at Germantown Middle School. Ben McLemore, he is at Lewisburg Middle School. And then we have Chris Chandler from Gaucher High School. He is actually has his band at Prefest tonight, so he's not going to be able to join us. We have thought through topics as a committee of what would be most beneficial to us during the specific times of year. And we hope that you will enjoy this evening about just all things evaluation day. It's important to play the music well, but if that's all we do, unfortunately, we won't be successful. And so we hope that you will enjoy this evening. Just really quickly, if you have questions, please place those in the chat and we will address those as we go. If they are questions about something that we're not talking about tonight, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll be happy to answer those at the very end. Tonight we have with us Mr. Justin Harvison. He is the band director at Germantown High School. I had the pleasure of getting to know Mr. Harvison. We did Lines Band together, a good time and super thankful for that time. He is very, very successful at what he does, and we are excited to have him join us tonight as he shares his knowledge about all things evaluation day. Let me get the screen shared and we will get started. All right, Mr. Harvison, is that good?
That looks great.
Awesome.
Hear me okay? Can you hear me, Miss
Yes,
Pickering?
all
Okay.
you.
Yeah, so thank you, Miss Pickering, for allowing me to come do this. And she's right, we did get to know each other a while back doing Lions Band together. We were just talking about, I have a picture of Miss Pickering holding my then newborn daughter, who is now 8. I just can't believe it was that long ago. So, but yeah, so thanks for having me. And I hope this stuff that I did make a PowerPoint because it's the easiest way for me to sort of get all of my thoughts in one place. And I thought also that when we're finished, that anybody who found any of this helpful can use it for themselves or throw it in the trash, whatever. It's whatever you like out of this, take it. Whenever you disagree with, throw it in the trash, disagree with it, or whatever. It's fine with me. So I did kind of have a PowerPoint to go with this, and Miss Pickering also really bailed me out back at clinic this past December when my tech didn't work then. She's bailing me out again tonight to help, and she's going to help click through these slides for me to keep everything going. But before we get started, I do want to say that these are things that I do. These are things that I've learned over the past 17 years doing this, and some of them are things I sort of came into on my own, and some of them are things I learned from other people. Most notably, probably Terry Ingram, who was my band director in high school, and then is basically a father to me and has helped me along the way on all of this. I learned probably the most from him, but also I learned a lot of this from Chuck Reynolds, my great friend down at Madison Central High School. And then I also learned a lot specifically with the sight reading part of evaluation from Susan Schumann. She was a big help to me when I was first starting out. And so a lot of this, again, I can't take credit for it on my own. The stuff that you like, I'm great to take credit for. The stuff you don't like is probably the stuff Chuck Reynolds came up with. So we'll see. But if we can get started on the next slide, and then we can just kind of get started with it. I tried to do this sort of in sequence of how your prep for everything will go. And so I kind of started like before you go to festival, and by before I mean maybe it's 2 weeks out. Maybe it's like right now. I think it's probably a good time to be thinking about it. And before the big day, there needs to be obvious prep, for sure with everything that you're doing with your your prep for your repertoire, the stuff that you're doing on the daily to build your bands, to build their skill set, all the things. So the obvious prep is just the stuff that you're doing on the daily to get ready. But as part of that, I think you need to try to incorporate talking to them about that day and prime them for what things are going to be like. I'm a big fan and I'm a big believer in visualization. Them being able to visualize and sort of put themselves there and have that imagination of like, here's how this is going to be when I do it. And if that's a part of their prep, I think that's just going to help set them up for success. So, like one of the little bullets I have there is like talk to them about things like the stage will probably be hot. I love playing on the stage at Pearl High School. That's where we've played for many, many years. I love the stage. I love the way it sounds from where I am on the box. But I also know that that stage gets pretty hot pretty quick. And I know a lot of stages are moving to things like LED lights, and that'll quickly become a thing of the past. But just things like that, things that you know are going to be something that they need to think about ahead of time is really important. So talk to them about that, get them prepared, be like, hey, when we get there, we got to walk a little bit when we get off the bus. Just things like that are helpful. The next thing is number your judges scores. And I've judged before at state festivals where I get the score. I mean, I obviously want to give good feedback, and I go to give feedback and I don't know where we are in the score, especially if it's like older music where they don't have every measure numbered, you know. Uh, be sure to do that. But more than that, uh, your scores, when the judges get them, that's one of the first things they're going to see about you. And it really sets the tone for your performance. So make sure your scores are clean. Make sure that they don't have old markings in them. And when you do number the measures, make sure you number them well, cleanly, and not just scribble through them. I I can't help it. I have to say, like I've judged bands before where I get the packet and I pull it out, and there's a big coffee stain on the front of the first page, and that immediately tells me a lot about what I need to know. And and I know maybe that's not right because it has nothing to do with how they play, but I will tell you that the bands where that has happened, where I've pulled the score out and there's a big coffee stain or a spaghetti stain on the front of it, pretty much correlated with how they played as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. It really sets the tone. And additionally, we are in the business of aesthetics. So what are they going to wear? And that is up to whatever you think is most appropriate. But they do need to look professional. So we wear concert black. Not every I know, like again, my friend Chuck down at Madison, they just wear I think they just wear just black, and I think he wears a tie. You don't have to go full tuxedo if you don't want to, but I think the main thing is you just look good and you look professional. So the biggest thing there is defining what it is and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we all follow through. The next thing is to practice in it. The first time that they play in that get up does not need to be when you take them to festival, because there's constraints. It's different, it feels different. And like for as a brass player, uh when I would play trombone, like if that top button was too tight, it was going to change how I voiced things. It was going to change how the instrument felt, how it felt with my posture. So give them plenty of opportunity to practice in that attire. And again, if you can do it in a pre-festival situation, that's even better. But give them a chance to do that. The next thing is to change their environment as much as you can. Again, this is before you go to festival. Get them in another room, put them on a stage. If you have a PAC, get them on the stage and then put them in a different band hall. Or if you have the opportunity, take them to a pre-festival. But taking them through the process, I think, is oftentimes just as important as them playing the notes and the music right. Because if they don't know the process, if they're not good at the process, that's going to take away from what they can truly do and how they can truly achieve what you've taught them to do and what they're capable of. So try to do that. Get them in a different environment where you can. Um, don't play too much before the day leading up, like the day before. You want to keep them fresh physically and mentally. Just so don't play too much. Do a little bit here and there just to keep them sharp, but don't overdo it and don't wear their face out before they have to play their concert the next day. Um, this is another thing that I've thought about recently, but please don't. And I have to talk to my own students about this because they'll get really excited about going to festival, and before I know it, the trombone section is having this trombone cleaning party, and they're like taking slides out and dismantling the F attachment to make sure it's really nice and polished. And it almost sent me through the roof when I saw that. This was, I think, last year. But please, like, you don't want to do any of those things the day before. That is just not the time to maintenance everything and do all of that. Especially now, like when we go to contests the way we do, way back in our band director ancestors that had to go in the spring and had to do marching and concert in the spring, and they had to do inspection. I've heard horror stories about that. We don't have to do that. So unless it is something that is um, directly interfering with their own progress with their instruments, please don't take their horns apart and do all the maintenance and all that. Um, Rehearse your warm up procedures like you're going to do in warm up that day. And that sort of goes along with that whole visualization part, like really thinking about how it's going to be that day. Rehearse that. It's just as big a part of the day as anything else. So define it early, say, here's what we're going to do, and then do it. And part of that consists of warming up, tuning, hitting hot spots in the music that you think you need to do. But just again, for them to know what's coming is going to be that much more beneficial for them and you. And then the last little bit, this is the day before, is sleep. The older I get, the more I can't preach this enough or talk about this enough, how important sleep is and rest for them for sure, but probably more importantly for you, that you get a good night's sleep, as hard as that's going to be the night before with the jitters and the nerves. Um, do as much as you can to take care of yourself and get some rest so you can be your best for them the next day. So that's really the before the big day, either you know a week before or 2 weeks before until the day of. And then here's some general thoughts on when the big day gets here. The first thing is consistency. Keep everything as normal as possible. And I try to think about it as bringing the environment that you've created in your band hall, try to bring that with you to wherever you are going with your kids, because that's what they're most comfortable in. Likely, that's what they're most comfortable in. So keep that in mind. Part of that consistency is making sure you have a plan, planning everything from transportation and logistics to what you're going to do musically. Um, just starting with transportation, making sure you have buses and drivers for them and knowing where you're going. And I know, you know, when I first became a band director, I mean, we didn't have Google Maps. Like, I had to print out stuff off of MapQuest and make sure we got there, and that's all, fine and good. But now that part of it is easier, but I don't think you should discount it, because there are often times where it'll take you one place where you're supposed to be going to a next place. So just keep that in mind. Make sure, if you know you're going to a certain location, make sure it's taking you to the location that has the performing arts center or the auditorium, wherever it is, because sometimes it'll take you to a middle school when you're supposed to be going to or it takes you to a high school when you're supposed to be going to a middle school, wherever the location is. But so just check those things. Your on-site logistics, thinking about like your gear, like your own stuff versus what's there. um, I will be honest with you. I take my own stuff everywhere, just because, to try to keep it with that first bullet point, to keep everything consistent. I certainly don't want my timpanist having to pedal on a timpani that they are not used to. Um, so, and if I apply that same principle through the whole ensemble, I just wind up taking everything. And I know that may not be possible for everyone, but I would highly advise you to take as much of your own stuff as you can for consistency. Um, I even take my podium, because when I get in front of them, I want to be able to see the same eyes that I always see, and the same tops of heads that I'm used to seeing, and the same hands that I'm used to seeing. So I want my vantage point to be the exact same to what I'm used to. So again, just to keep everything consistent, just maybe consider taking as much as you can. But if that's not something you're not too concerned about, then that's fine. But again, those are just some things to consider. Um, your setup, like, for instance, the chairs that I use in my ensemble work fine for all instruments. However, when we go to other places, the chairs that are there may not, like, aren't, the tubas, for example, don't fit the same way on the chair that they're used to. So it changes this, it changes how they're sitting, it changes their posture, their hand position, and all those things matter. Uh, and so the last thing I want to do is get them in a position where they're sitting in a chair and it's uncomfortable all of a sudden, because then they're thinking about that. They're not thinking about playing as well as they could have. So think about that. I always bring my own tuba chairs. I even bring my own horn chairs just because my horns are finicky about that and they want their own chair. So I bring that and I try to do everything I can to just keep them comfortable. And so they can have an unhindered um, opportunity to play their best. So those are just some things to think about with logistics. Musically, it kind of talked about this earlier, but the warm ups, uh, already have an idea of what you're going to do whenever you get there. I don't get in there and just wing it. Be like, well, let's do number 4 in the warm ups today. Like, know exactly what you're going to do, because not only is that going to keep your students calm and centered, it's going to keep you calm and centered as well. Tuning, do your same tuning procedures you always have. If you've never tuned your third French horn, the warm up room is not the time to do it. Tune the people that you are, and if that's everybody, if you typically tune everybody, then tune everybody. But do that. Just stay consistent. Don't change anything. Hot spots in the music. If there's a certain transition, or you really want to hit the transition between the trio and the dogfight of your march or whatever, do that. But I would recommend mapping that out, giving that to them ahead of time, so they know, like, okay, this is our next hot spot, almost like a call sheet where they know it's happening. Again, that's not only for them, it's for you, to keep you centered and keep you calm in that moment. Part assignments, particularly in sight reading and in percussion, have all that stuff decided beforehand. Have the section leaders know the breakdown on how many first clarinets, how many second clarinets. If there's 2 parts, who goes to first, who goes to second instead of second, third. Have all that worked out ahead of time, so you're not trying to figure that out while you're also trying to figure out how to get this sight reading done. With regard to the percussion, I would have it, and we get that is some of the information that we get before we go. We do know the percussion breakdown, so I would always have, excuse me, your percussion personnel picked, and that's how you're rehearsing it when you're working on sight reading. And don't deviate from that. Don't get in there and be like, oh well, you played snare last time, so let's play bass. And I would keep it the same every single time. You're welcome to switch it up in rehearsal until you find the right um, configuration, and then after that, I'd stick to that and do it every time. The next thing is just to remain calm. Things are going to happen. And whether it's in the logistics or it's in the actual music itself, anytime there's live music, even if it's the Marine band, there's going to be things that happen. And how we handle that, I think, there's a direct correlation to how we handle that and how the kids are going to handle it. And I've always said that kids are a mirror. They're going to be a reflection of however you handle that. So if a clarinet comes in early and whatever you're doing, if you look at them with this crazy look on your face, that may not be the best response. It may be the best thing, maybe to smile and give them some way to, like, that's okay. Like, let's just recover. And I feel like that's things like that will help it from just snowballing into this, and for a mistake becoming a catastrophe. Um, take everything, take everything, take extra music. I take up their music folders that morning or the night before and give it to them when they get in the warm up room. I'm not saying everyone has to do that. I even like to think that my kids are mature enough to not have to do that, but I just don't trust them. Um, and I think, quite honestly, I think you're living dangerously if you let them take their own stuff. But even regardless of how you do that, take extra music, take extra hard copies of everything, take extra reeds, extra repair kits. If you're lucky enough to have a great staff like mine, I usually have someone that sort of has a responsibility. Like um, if we have an instrument repair issue, they're going to go see Darius Valentine. Like, they know that that's where they're going. And particularly if it's a brass instrument, if it's a woodwind instrument, they're going to see Allie Taylor. If it's percussion, they're going to Ryan Saul. So it's one of those things that if you're lucky enough to have that divided out like that, take advantage of that because you want to take as much off yourself that day and delegate as much as you think as you're comfortable with doing. I was also extremely lucky when I first started teaching. I think it was the second time I went to festival. Um, I had a we were going from the stage or from the warm up room to the stage and had a French horn string pop. And luckily, Chuck Reynolds was there and just took it and fixed it, and we were able to get that kid situated before it was time. So don't try to do. My point to that is don't try to do everything on your own. Try to delegate that stuff out as best you can, but also plan ahead because the only thing worse than not delegating would be to just throw that on somebody and they're not ready for it because that probably won't fix the problem either. So communicate that with other folks if you're able to do that. Um, the next thing is I'm really oddly passionate about this, but water. Uh, I anytime I do anything that is performance related, band, or even talking on this Zoom, I have water with me, and because I think dry mouth is a major stress response for a lot of people, and I don't think a lot of people realize what a stress response that is, especially kids. But I've just learned over the years that if I have water, like it's just going to help everything because I get dry mouth really bad. So um, some of your kids may realize that they have a real nervous like response to stuff like that, especially when it comes to just performance anxiety in general. Introduce them to just like taking water with them and having it with them, and I think that'll really help. But the idea also is just to take out every possible variable out of the equation. Like if you get dry mouth or you have a kid that may have a pretty serious stress response to that, just give them water and make sure they keep up with it. But every kid that goes on the stage will have a bottle of water in my ensemble, whether they want it or not. Their own if they don't ever take it, that's fine. But they have to make sure that it gets off the stage and they clean up after themselves. But whether they want it or not, they're having it. And the next thing, this is just sort of a side note. It's up to you, but the brain is the biggest energy glutton in our entire body. It's a pretty small comparatively organ to everything else in our body, but it eats up and uses more energy than any other organ in our body. So I kind of made this observation through watching my own school do state testing and making sure they had access to food in between breaks and everything because it zaps kids of their brain power when they're focused. When you talk about going from warm up to the stage, you're talking about anywhere from an hour and a half to an hour and a half, maybe more. By the time it's time for them to go this to the stage to sight reading, I mean, some of them are zapped. So in the past, and some years I've done this, some years I haven't. I've just given them a little Smartie candy for them to eat it quick, and then drink the water, and then just get rid of the wrappers and never leave that stuff at the band hall. So or wherever site you're at. But that's just something to think about. Maybe be helpful, maybe not. So that's that for the everything, taking everything. And then the next thing is the hay is in the barn. When you get to that day and you are walking in the warm up room, and I put a little thing over here, it is what it is, and just smile and have the peace of knowing that you've done all you can do to set these students up for success and try to enjoy it as much as you can. And just to kind of go back to our consistency things, warm up with your normal procedures, make them as comfortable as possible, tune as normal. Do not try anything new. It's not the time for that. Do not rehearse your band during this time. It's not the time to, oh well, there's this little section we never could quite get worked out. Let's take a couple of more minutes to try to do it. I don't really think if it's still not happening there, it's probably not, and you're probably only adding stress to their ability to attempt to do it. So don't try anything new. Stick to the warm up procedures you rehearsed before. Don't be afraid to let them play a little bit on their own to get their jitters out. I think it's especially that day when you get in there, it's good to kind of have a little bit of this, to just let them do their thing for a minute. Give them some time to kind of just get themselves right, and then smile, and build them up. And even if you hear a couple of things that aren't like you want them to, and I'm guilty of that. I have to remind myself to. If you hear some kind of odd stuff that you're not used to hearing, like, still just smile, build them up, and help them have an exciting, fulfilling performance. And then it's time to breathe and play together. Welcome to the stage. When they get them on the stage, I'd meant to put this earlier, but have a plan on how you're gonna actually get them on. Talk to them about how they're gonna snake. This person's gonna follow this person. This person's gonna follow this person, because much like your scores and how they're dressed, how they get on the stage is setting the tone for how they're going to play as well. I've judged before and seen just a mass of people just take the stage with no coordination or no planning, and it's chaos. And aside from how that looks, that's also putting them in a state of chaos, to where they're not able to have an orderly way to get on the stage, to where you can be there to sort of foster a calm, focused intensity. And if everybody's just getting on the end of their seat their own way, I do not think that's the great way to start everything. So talk to them about how they're going to get on the stage, who's following who, how it's going to snake through. Do that several days before, and then remind them of that before they get to the stage. But then when they get to the stage and they're situated, let them play a little on their own. Once they're situated, just let them play. Let them get worked out, but tell them what they should be doing with that. And what I always tell them is, like, listen, like, it needs to be more about their ears when you let them play on their own than it is them playing. They need to be listening to how their sound and how the rest of the band sounds when they're on the stage, and so how they can adjust and what they can anticipate things to be different from what they just heard in the warm-up room and what they're used to hearing in the band hall. So that I think that little moment, no more than a minute or maybe no more than 90 seconds, let them play on their own. And that's going to seem like a long time, but just let them go. It'll be fine. Um, the next thing is to play a chorale together. Something that you, hopefully part of your prep that you've been doing for the past months involves a chorale. And involves a chorale that they play really well together. Is sort of your baseline where we get everybody to play well in a certain homogenized style to where we all sound good. Play that chorale and play, because it's a performance. It's not judged, but it is a performance. The judges who are listening as intently to that chorale than anything else that you're playing. I guarantee it. So use that, but use it as an opportunity for them to hear each other, hear the stage, and make adjustments. Um, and I give them some short feedback. Like after that, I'll walk over and say, "Hey, French horns, this curtain right here is really eating up your sound. So it may not sound as loud as you're used to, but don't change anything." I would be very, 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 very careful about telling them to make adjustments on the fly, such as, "Hey, percussion, that back wall is really loud, so play way softer." I'd be very careful about that, because if they're doing that the entire concert and that's not something you can change in the middle of a tune or even over the course of the concert, you might wind up with some pretty big problems. But if there's some small things that you can tell them just to make them aware of, I think that's good. But just keep in mind, they need to be small adjustments. Once you get situated, move some folks around if they need to. Make sure everyone can see you and that the environment is as close as what you're used to as possible. So if you get there and you're able to have a direct line of sight with your snare drummer on the march, and you get up there and you can't see him, or he's having to look over someone to see you, do not start the march. Don't start. Take a second. Get everything the way. There is no one timing this. I mean, I guess technically they are, but it's not like a competition to where if you go 1 second over, it's going to be a problem. Take a second, get them moved how you need them to with a purpose, but don't sacrifice the quality of your performance just because you're ready to get started, especially if it's a small adjustment. I do not recommend playing any unison notes on the stage before playing the concert. I do not recommend on the stage everyone concert F off, concert F or anything like that. I don't think the stage is the place for that. I would play again. A chorale is good, but I would encourage you to stay away from unison anything on the stage before you play. Um, try to enjoy your time on stage with your students. This is something that I struggle with every single year because I outwardly I try to be chill and excited for my kids, but inwardly I am a ball of nerves. And I found the last several years that when I smile, I calm down. Like not just the perception of their perception of me, but I actually calm down and I get to enjoy it more. Um, because that's what we're all in this for. We're all in this for the joy that music brings us and seeing our students do it, and seeing our students grow through learning music. So try to smile, try to enjoy it. Strive for a relaxed but focused state. They need to be very intense and very focused, but talk about and stress that they need to be relaxed when they do it. To relax and breathe and fall back to their training. And we talk about that a lot at my place where in high stress environments, you're always going to fall back to your training. And if they're getting that training like they should be, on the daily over the short and long term, they're going to be able to get into that relaxed, focused flow state because they're going to be able to fall back to their training and just do the thing. So keep that in mind. And the last thing is, do you really need your scores? Like I've seen a lot of people that I think miss out on, and this is more of a score study, I think, conversation, but I do want to put it out there that when I stopped using my scores because I was just like I don't need them. It's one more. It's just something to occupy this hand when I don't know what to do with it, right? Like it's just this all the time. When I just got rid of that, I got to experience my kids more and got to experience their performance more. The communication was so much better. If you feel, especially if there's no time changes in it, right? If it's just 4-4 the whole time or it's a march and two the whole time, I would encourage you, obviously not on that day, but well beforehand, like do after score, like, and just so you can communicate. If anything, you can communicate with your kids more. Now, if it's something that's got some very difficult time signature changes, and you really are relying on it for the conducting aspect, then by all means use it if you need to. But otherwise, I think that's just one of those things that helps us stay relaxed and stay focused. And if we're focused on our kids, we're focused on the music, getting rid of the score, I think tends to help sometimes. And there's a lot of words on this next slide because there's just a lot of things I wanted to talk about it. But before we do that, I want to go down to the very bottom little bullet at the bottom there. One of my colleagues and I had this conversation very, very recently, Miss Taylor, that I've always felt like the stage is more or less where the kid. And I know this is probably going to create uh, a firestorm of conversation, but this is just my opinion. Um, but I've always felt the stage is where more or less where the kids are evaluated on how they are playing. That's not to say that it's not evaluating us too, because we obviously had to get them there. But the sight reading room, for me, I've always felt like this is where the teacher is really under the microscope as far as their procedures, their classroom management, their fundamentals, their musicality, their conducting chops, all of those things come into one summative assessment. Um, and I've even invited my principal to the sight reading room before because I wanted him to see. I want him to see like, hey, here's what we do. Because I feel like in that sight reading room, that's where you see the sausage being made, essentially. Um, Regardless if the students play great or if they're just okay or they're still developing, everything that you're going to be able to see happens in that sight reading room as far as what the band director's approach is. So before we get into this, I kind of want to talk about that sort of as the end game on why I think the sight reading part of this is important. Um, but I think there's two parts of the prep. There's the director prep and there's the student prep. But I think a quick formal analysis of the piece when you get it, when you have that minute to sit down and look at it, um, is important. Like, know what the form is. If it's like a little fanfare and then we go into a march, like, I think it's important to know how that's going to play out and be able to explain that to the students. Say, hey, guys, we're going to have this little fanfare first, and then we have this march. For them to be able to take the macro and then boil it down to the micro, I think that that helps them sort of have an idea of how the sight reading is going to play out. And then the next thing is being able to determine at the very least mode here. Like, if are we in major or are we in minor? If the first sounds they're going to play in the piece, are they going to be happy major? Are they going to be minor sad? They're going to be somewhere in between. I know we had a sight reading 2 years ago that was in Lydian, and so it's kind of different. I told them, like, this is going to sound weird when you get going, but that's okay. And I really feel like it helped the kids. Like, they kind of knew that this accidental, I know I'm playing it right, but he told us it's going to sound weird. Sounds kind of weird, but trust what's there. All that to say, I think being able to do just a general, quick, formal, and harmonic analysis, and I'm not talking about Roman numerals the whole way through. I'm just saying, just where are we at in terms of mode, it will be really important. The next thing, and this is for me because I had a almost traumatic experience early on in my teaching career, um, where I could not physically grab the next page to turn the page, and I had to just guess where the piece was going to end because I could not turn the pages when we were actually playing the sight reading. So what I do now is I just dog ear the very bottom of each page, so I know when I go to grab that page, it's going to turn, because it is terrifying when they're going and they're playing and you can't get that page turned because they're stuck together because it's brand new music and the ink's barely dry. Um, I cannot recommend that enough, doing that. And it doesn't have to be anything big, just enough to where you have something to grab onto. I also take a notepad when I have my prep time to sit and just make little notes about little gotcha things. Like, I wrote in the PowerPoint, like, there's a I like a B sharp. Be like, hey, here's all. It's just a C. Like, stuff like that. Like, tell them, here's all this is. I think that's helpful for them to know, and that's helpful for you to have and help answer, like, burning questions they may have. Um, Check the volume of your voice. I know this is something I have to work on. When we get excited, we all tend to speak a little bit louder than we probably need to, and I find that with kids, especially in a stressful environment, that's not going to do anything but stress them out a little bit more. So try to be on the softer side. If anything, I think it makes them lean in and listen a little more intently. Um, so that's just something to consider. But it also encourage your kids to give you some feedback and questions. I always feel so much better when I look out there and there's eyeballs looking at me and I see this or this. I know they're either getting the information or they're not, or they have a question. So encourage them to participate and be interactive with you whenever you're going through your little walkthrough with them. And of course, always follow the sight reading coordinator instructions and be professional and polite. And I know we can get really stressed out, and sometimes outwardly that can come across as snippy or whatever. But I think it's important for us for our professionalism to stay grounded and to really follow the instructions and to be professional and polite, and to encourage our kids to do the same. As far as the student prep is concerned, I give mine 90 seconds to just look over it. They obviously can't make any sounds, but they look over it. The things I encourage them to look for is to find the hardest rhythm, to find the easiest rhythm. The easiest rhythm is probably the one that's going to mess them up. They will get the hard one easy. It's a whole note that they'll give two counts to that becomes an issue. Silly stuff probably because of the stress. Find the shortest note, find the longest note. Critical notes in a key, and I can kind of go into this. This is kind of a pedagogical thing, but we talk about critical notes in a key. So, for instance, if you're in B flat, the critical note in that key will be A natural. So, the note or notes that they will tend to miss within a key. So, if you're in A flat major, the concert D flat's probably what they're going to miss. Stuff like that. Go through your critical notes in that key, have them finger it or slide it, have them put their finger down or put the slide in the slide position on where it is so they know about it. When you do your walkthrough, talk through the key, make them touch the key with their finger, go through the transitions, fermatas, tell them how you're going to conduct it, talk through that, ask for questions. And then after you do that, it's time to airplay and rehearse and just go through the piece the best you can. always focus on your transitions. That's probably going to be the most uh, the thing in any sight reading that gets more people are the transitions from ideas or part to part, especially if it involves a key change or a time change. Um, so it's just time to work on that. If you can, I always try to get through it twice, all the way through. There have been plenty of times where I didn't get through the whole thing at all because I wound up digging into something that I thought was a little more important than air playing all the way through. So if you can, try to make the goal to get airplay through it together twice before it's time to play. Ask the sight reading conductor, I'm sorry, sight reading coordinator if you can play a chorale. I've never been told no, but I think it's always appropriate to ask before you do that, and then play the chorale before you play the piece. The next thing is when you actually do the sight reading is to play it with confidence. And if there are softer dynamics, I always tell my kids to, and this works for me. I don't know if I do this for say this as a blanket statement for everyone. Like I'll tell mine to up it, what if it's a softer dynamic to up it by a half of a dynamic level, just so it doesn't come across lacking confidence or weak. I'd much rather it be a little softer but with confidence, or sorry, a little louder but with confidence than softer and it not be a good characteristic sound or not confident. And then the same thing with fast tempi in a piece that has a fast tempo. I always encourage people to go a little on the slower side because because of two things. One, your adrenaline is going to make you feel like you are going faster. And the second thing is that I think any sight reading judge would much rather hear something played a little slower but better achieved than faster at tempo and with problems. It's the old adage that speed kills, and I think that applies to tempo and sight reading. I tend to back it off a little bit on the so if it says allegro, probably going allegretto. I'm just going to be honest, because by the time we do it and the nerves kick in, it's probably going to be allegro anyway. So that's just something to kind of consider when you're deciding. You don't have a metronome to rehearse, and you have to sort of determine what allegro means. The other thing is terms. This didn't make it on the list because I just thought of it. But there's times where there will be musical terms in that music that we don't see every day. And you got to be ready for that. And I think that's part of your director prep. I mean, we have these, super brains in our pocket all the time. We can get anything we need. Um, I think it's important to really think about those terms and to not just let them go, like to really dig in and make sure they know what the terms are, especially if there's something outside of allegro, uh, moderato, or retard. I think you probably want to double check that they know. But and again, just to wrap up, I feel like the sight reading bit is where we can really show what kind of teacher we are. Not that the stage isn't. I think it's equally important, but all of it together sort of makes up for this big summative assessment that we're an evaluation that we're about to put our kids through. And ultimately, it winds up being about growing them and teaching wonderful music literacy combined with the skill that they need to have to play their instrument and to put it into practice. So that's my little presentation on how I approach the evaluation day, and I hope that wasn't too rigid, but it was enough for you to kind of get everything you needed out of that idea wise. So
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the group tonight? We'll be happy to take those in the chat and get those answered. Mr. Harvison, how do you, if you were taking a young group, how are you going to airplay / talk to the kids about that and guarantee they're not making sounds?
yeah, and I mean, depending on the site you go to, I know like at Pearl, Ted Burns is great about telling the students exactly what they can and cannot do. But again, to prepare them to make sure that they're ready for it. For instance, with the flutes, turn it all the way over so there's no air going into the hole at all. Um, Make sure you tell them that like they cannot make sounds. If they make sounds, everything goes down by a rating. Um, I know some people like to sizzle. I'm not opposed to sizzling. Um, it may be good for a younger band to do that, so it's completely removed anywhere from making any sounds. Um, but I think for me, just in my experience, it's just really stressing that you cannot make any sounds, and um, taking the clarinets or like the saxes, clarinets, all mouthpiece all the way out of the mouth, and just you know sizzling or something like that. I think that's probably the best way to do that.
Okay. And just a reminder to everybody, you can take other directors, other people into the sight reading room with you. I love taking someone with me to stand over my shoulder when I'm looking at that score, because there could be something that you miss, or somebody say, hey, preferably someone more experienced, or somebody that's been around for a while, but just as a reminder that you can do that. Now, those people cannot be in your set for the performance, but they can be in the room with you to even help students during the prep process.
That's a wonderful point, and I'm sorry that I missed that. That is excellent because that's absolutely critical. Um, my when we go, I really try, and we have to deal with like class coverage and stuff like that. But I try my best to make sure I can have almost all, if not every, director there to help with that, and to be looking over their shoulder. Let's F natural here, and you know, uh, go. We go to 2/4 here, just to have someone there that they can kind of. I think for the stress part of it, that helps just bring the stress level down for everybody. So yeah, that's a great point, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention that, but
No, that's wonderful. I just wanted to add that we did a specific sight reading clinic earlier in the semester, and we did touch on that, but we do have some new faces in here. I have a question in the chat. It says, what do you
uh,
do with extra percussionists during sight reading?
if there's more percussionists there than what is assigned in the reading, then they help load the truck. I don't, like they're helping get the stuff off the stage or whatever. Typically, we have had in the past maybe one or two kids that aren't involved in the sight reading. That doesn't mean that they don't sight read in class and do something with that, but it just means that because of the instrumentation, they don't that day. I don't. I've never been in a situation where I've considered doubling anything back there. I just look at it like there's this many parts, and we have more people than there are parts for, so they're going to go do something else, and we figure out what that is later. And typically, that's helping get stuff off the stage for transition to the next thing. So that may not be a great answer, but
No,
that's
that's perfect. I mean,
one.
that's really good. If you were not in a situation to be able to send kids somewhere, you could always have them shadow somebody in the prep and
Yeah,
step away during the thing. So regardless of what situation you're in, I love that idea as well.
yeah.
This says I don't play a chorale after sight reading prep, but I do have them play the scale just to give them each note and make sure that they have that key. We practice this in class whenever we read.
If the sight reading coordinator allows that, then I think you do.
Mhm.
Beg, borrow, steal, chill, whatever you got to do. Like if they're okay with it, then I don't see a problem with it. I mean, the past several years, uh, well, maybe not last year, I can't remember, but some years like we're just going to play crowd one, like that's what I'm going to play, and some years it's lined up where we're in F, some years it's not. So, but I think if anything, it's just I think that's a great strategy, and I think it works. And as long as they allow it, I think it's fine. But for me, more than anything, it's just to get them just playing, you know, so they know. But as far as I think that's also a helpful thing, and I know I've seen people do it in their prep where they'll finger or like they'll airplay that scale to where they're in that and they're at least in the same key signature, and I think that's great also. So I don't think there's any like one way to do those things. I think it's helpful if you can just play something. So the first note they play is not a brand new note, you know. So
Any other questions?
Mr. Valentine, you ain't got any questions?
Valentine's being quiet tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
What a rare commodity for me to be quiet.
Well, thank you guys so much for spending your evening with us. Mr. Harvison, thank you so much for spending your evening with us and giving us all that information. That's huge. I'll be sharing it with lots of folks and taking a lot of that with me. So thank you very much for that. And I hope that everyone else has learned something. I know we have several student teachers in this group, and I tell them every week how excited we are that they are here learning the process of lots of things early. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I wish I would have done that when I student taught. So again, thank you so much, Mr. Harvison. And thank you all for
Thank
spending your
you.
evening with us.
And good luck to everyone. Good luck. Have
Yes,
fun.
absolutely. We will be doing our last one of the semester, the third Wednesday of April. So be sure to jump on with us then. And then we'll take a break for the summer and hopefully join back together in the fall. Thank you again. If you have questions, my email is in the email that you received, as well as Ms. Swindle, Mr. McLemore, and Mr. Chandler. We'll be happy to answer those questions. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.